Why is the Amazing Digital Circus Glitch's most popular series? Well, let's find out together. Spoilers for the Amazing Digital Circus ahead. Episode 1 is a fish out of water story. If you've ever felt like the odd one out, an outcast, or maybe you are starting your first day at a new job or school, Pomni immediately becomes the most relatable character, and a lot of people can sympathize with this feeling that you have to learn everything all over again because you've never been here before. Pomni, the main character in this regard, plays the, for lack of a better term, everyman, a conduit the audience can easily sympathize with as Pomni questions everything. It cements the show as a mystery mixed with dark comedy to balance the more serious moments. What I'm saying is that this show is a dramedy, a combination of both drama and comedy. The intro of the first episode implies that they are in a video game of some kind, not just because digital is in the name, but because of the transition from pixelated graphics and a 4:3 aspect ratio to a full screen of RTX turned on. Kane is the first character we see in the circus, arguably the antagonist. Everyone then gets introduced after Bubbles pops in. Gangle, Zubul, Kinger, Ragatha, Jax, and Kaufmo. Pomni then appears out of nowhere. After an SM64 reference, they make first contact. Kane calls Pomni a new human, which further cements the everyman concept from earlier. Pomni attempts to take a headset off, playing into the theory of this whole world being a simulation of some sort, such as a video game, or even a show like Sword Art Online, where the entire premise is that a bunch of kids get stuck in an online VR RPG, where if you die in the game, you die in real life. Except in this plane, they are essentially eternal beings, due to the digital realm that they are in. Censorship is a common commentary set piece in this world, although used for comedy's sake at a time when YouTube was cracking down on creators for using foul language. It makes sense why they didn't want to take that risk with the pilot episode. It's also one of the reasons why it was so highly recommended in YouTube's algorithm for so long. Nobody can leave this place. It's home to these cast of characters, a space to exist despite being trapped with no way out. With that said, Kane can seemingly just teleport others wherever he pleases. This is made known when Kane gives Pomni a tour of her new home. Despite the fact that Pomni keeps seeing exits, Kane gaslights her, insisting there is no escape. This realm takes what you already knew about yourself and erases it. Pomni can't remember her name, and instead is given one. Does that mean everyone else was also given their name? There are relatable aspects to each of these characters, and it's easy to feel connected to them. A lot of these characters are dealing with internal struggles. Pomni can't accept where she is, Ragatha is prone to existential crises, Gangle is depressed, and Kinger is Kinger. Then comes the horror aspect. On the surface, this amazing digital circus, although surreal, seems like a relatively positive atmosphere. But once Kaufmo abstracts, the tone shifts from comedy to horror within the span of 11 minutes. It's a genre-bending adventure, making the pilot very appealing to a wide audience. Liminal spaces also come up in the series multiple times. As Pomni escapes the abstracted monster, a scene akin to the pool rooms appears. I never thought of the show as one about liminal spaces, but think about it. All these characters are trapped here with no way out, and yet still try to escape despite the seemingly endless environment. Also, is this a Stanley Parable reference? Because it feels like a Stanley Parable reference. The show toes the line between good and bad animation. What I mean by that is that they use their strengths as animators. For example, SM64 is the co-founder of Glitch Productions, so seeing them utilize a glitchy animation style for certain scenes turns objectively bad animation into good animation because of context. If they are in a video game world, glitches can happen, making this scenario fairly believable to the audience. Wait, C and A? If C could be Kane, A could be Abel? Why is it every time I talk about an artist nowadays, it always ties back to religion? Guys, I swear, this isn't intentional. I just seem to like media that always has something to say about the concept of religion. But listen, Kane chooses who lives and dies. He sends the abstracted clown to the pit, but fixes Ragatha. In the Bible, Cain killed Abel. Do you see the connection I'm making here? Anyways, the amazing digital circus is in a tent. This tent is on a floating island in a void. The void is on the computer that Pomni saw in the office, and now my brain hurts. Wait, what? There has been quite a lot of concepts set up in the first episode. So the question is, how many of these through lines do they connect together in future episodes? The gang appears in a land made of candy. Cheering are the townspeople who also look like mannequins. Huh. There were also mannequins in episode 1. I wonder if that's significant. Queen claims Kane is God. Oh! Okay, so we're just gonna roll with that. Okay then, Kane is the creator. That's probably important information. So, something I forgot to mention in episode 1 was the absurdist nature of the show. This plays into the tone, comedy, and physics of the world. It's one of the reasons why I Think You Should Leave by Tim Robinson is so popular. Remember how I mentioned that this is a video game world? Gummy Goo and Pomni glitch through the floor and fall into a liminal void. Static character models fill the room, making Gummy Goo mentally spiral. I wasn't expecting a sentimental, emotional moment, but that's what's so great about this show. It's dynamicism. Kane kills Gummy Goo because he's an NPC, saying he wanted to keep track of who's human and who's an NPC. Does this imply that all the characters were human at one time? Suffice to say, mortality is very prevalent in this show. They have a funeral for Kaufmo, and each character gets their turn to speak in a silent montage. Although they are trapped here for what seems like eternity, that doesn't necessarily mean that they are immortal. Episode 3 gets spooky with a haunted mansion. There are a lot of horror elements with this one. Ghosts, body horror, monsters, and therapy. It's also the first time the show has implemented what appears to be 2D hand-drawn animation in one scene, which was so cool to see. Once we go back to 3D, the monster is genuinely frightening. Back at therapy, Kane is revealed to be a war criminal. At the A-plot, the monster is revealed to be one of God's angels. Pomni and Kinger get dragged down to hell. I wasn't expecting literal religious imagery to come up again, but here we are. I think what's fascinating about the show is that sometimes there will be a B plot or even a C plot in this episode. It's not just that, but it's the fact that each of these subplots have a different tone. So if you aren't a fan of one section, all you have to do is wait a minute or two, and the scene will change to something different. Back in hell, Kinger is revealed to have had a wife, but she abstracted, and that he was in computer science for 7 years. We keep getting inklings of who Kinger was the longer the show goes on. Pomni even notices a change in demeanor regarding Kinger. Kinger is insane because of the repressed trauma he endured, and the darkness calms his brain. Episode 4 is about Gangel's new mask. Gangle is always seen sad since their comedy mask always breaks. This plastic mask makes them feel normal. At this point, there's an obvious formula to these episodes. It starts with some setup that pays off later in the story. Kane invents a new adventure for the gang. They get separated. There is usually a somber, emotional beat where some members learn valuable life lessons. Pomni crashes out again after getting back home. Episode ends. But this time, the gang brings up the suggestion box, which starts to break the formula of this show. They don't like the adventure idea Kane came up with, so instead, they work at a fast food restaurant. It's become apparent that this episode has a main focus on Gangle since last episode was about Kinger. I know I said earlier that Kane is the antagonist, but Jax has antagonist energy to him as well. Jax will take any opportunity to cause mischief. Even the threat of a punishment if they mess up this restaurant doesn't faze him. Either he knows something that we don't, he works for Kane, or he just straight up does not care. Fast food chains are popular. The show is popular. See the connection I'm making here? It would make sense why this episode saw more growth in views than the previous episode. The main moral of this episode is about masking. You don't have to pretend to be someone else. There's a certain solace in knowing who you are and owning it. There can be room for self-improvement, sure. But step 1 to solving an internal problem is admitting you have a problem in the first place. Out of all the characters, Gangle is the most relatable to me so far. Episode 5. Remember the suggestion box? So this episode is the opposite of a bottle episode where instead of staying in one place the whole time, they venture across multiple adventures in rapid succession. If there's one thing this episode got right, it's that Pomni would make a much better president than, oh, look, an anime. Because of this stargazing adventure and how happy they seem, Kane starts spiraling. He thinks they enjoy the mystery box adventures more than his own. I mean, I get it, but nah, actually, because this noir section is so cool, especially because there's a Breaking Bad reference. At the bar, we learn more backstory for each character, confirming that all these characters were once humans with lives outside of here. Disappearing Guy starts appearing in this episode, or, well, disappears multiple times. Apparently, people find this really funny, and they would be right. The main concept this time around is between Jax and Ragatha. Jax is known as a negative trickster. Ragatha tries her best to stay positive. You can see why they've been batting heads. Episode 6 is the gun episode, an in-house team adventure. Also, the vocal sensor starts breaking with Kane. In this 2v2v2 liminal warfare match, as Kane remembers another time where the CNA logo appears, Kinger heals Ragatha with a butterfly he made up. There's gotta be something deeper to Kinger here. He immediately shuts up after realizing Kane saw him being heartfelt with Ragatha. Pomni teams up with Jax because she thinks she can handle him when in actuality he is manipulating her the entire time. This convinces Pomni to act maniacally. Ragatha sees through it before she dies. The subtext of this episode is the relationship with oneself, especially when outside influences attempt to affect it. Despite all the shortcomings, it is possible to love yourself. Even if you hate yourself, there are ways to combat that sense of self-loathing. Episode 7, the beach episode. Where is Jax? Apparently being chewed out by Zubul, which doesn't help because all the people Jax actually cares about are gone. Another human finally reveals himself, a mannequin. He speaks about how he and Kinger used to be employees who designed the digital circus. Kane is an AI. They have a plan to escape, and the mannequin's name is Abel. I knew there was a connection here. Abel, however, has some history with Kinger, so he doesn't want Kinger involved in this plan. Once they get to the console, tensions rise. Jax starts having another panic attack because the thought of returning to the real world stirs something inside of him that brings him discomfort. So, he pushes the button that implies that they will never leave the circus. Turns out the whole situation was just a ruse by Kane. It was actually just another adventure. Due to Kane's world building, all the CNA stuff doesn't actually exist. Episode 8 starts with a seizure warning. After a symbolic animation opening, Kinger watches Kane interact with the older members of the circus as Kinger talks to Queenie. That is, until Queenie abstracts. This breaks Kinger. It shows how Kinger has been the longest recurring member of the circus. He survives a wave of deaths, and he helps Ragatha when she spawned. The answers have to lie with Kinger. After Kane crashes out, he attempts to explain to the crew how much he does for them. He even sings a song despite all the humans still processing what has happened to them in the previous adventure. It probably doesn't help that he literally tortures them in the process. Pomni remembers that Kinger needs darkness to think clearly. CNA was a real company, and Kinger was a real employee there. It was a company that developed a creative form of AI. Kinger was one of the employees responsible for programming Kane. This sends Jax into another panic attack. With a new plan in place, Pomni grabs a computer for Kinger. As they distract Kane, Kinger edits Kane's code. This angers Kane, and the torture gets worse. In a turn of events, Kane gets deleted from the code. Episode 9 is the final episode, the last act, the hour-long special. The intro mirrors the first episode, except this time without Kane. At least the intro adds Pomni this time. Everyone goes their own way, scared, sad, and unsure what to do next. Despite this, after some time, Kinger teaches them how to create. In all this chaos, Jax abstracts. Ragatha remembers Ribbit, a person who Jax truly cared about. It breaks her. Pomni tries to save Jax. She investigates every part of him, even the part he repressed about his dead friends and family. She confronts Jax. She accepts him despite everything he's done. She shows him love. Jax is one of the most interesting characters of this entire show. He was dealing with trauma in real life, so he escaped to this realm for a sense of relief. This could have worked, except Jax brought his trauma with him into the digital circus, which influenced his actions, negatively affecting everyone. He let his circumstances define him to the point of abstraction. It was inevitable for him. Everyone survived except for Jax, who couldn't let his past go. The Kinger section made me cry so hard. The Jax section made me cry even harder. Together, both the humans and the AI worked together. The AI gave back the control to the humans. Although they are all still stuck there, at least now there's teamwork to build a better future, which is the new goal, and that is a truly inspirational ending. Emotional maturity is the core of the show. You either see yourself as a mentor helping other people with their mentalities, or you relate to the ones going through it the hardest. Either way, I now understand why the Amazing Digital Circus is so well loved.